creative writing is important in schools, because I think it empowers children. It gives you, because if you write something, you've got ownership of it. What happens is because it's what you want to happen. And again, I think it then encourages very divergent thinking, because you think, oh, let's try this. Oh, let's try that. Oh, let's try the other. And before you know it, you've got a whole springboard of different ideas. There are reading and writing opportunities just from everything around you. Our world is full of wonders. It's like you pass a post box on the street, thousands and thousands of people have posted letters in there. Who are they? Or you pass a statue. What might that statue say? If it could make a comment on all the things that it's seen, because of all the things that have happened underneath it.
Hi, and welcome back to Creative Minds Shaping the Future. I'm your host, Emma Palastanga. I'm an educator, author, and now podcast producer, curious to discuss a range of views on creativity and curriculum. In Series 2, we explore creative expression and why it is important for all of us. Greaves is a children's writer, tutor and workshop leader. She has worked as a tour guide, classroom practitioner and literacy intervention teacher. Her writing career has included a range of well-received stories and playscripts commissioned by the BBC, Channel 4 and Granada TV. Karen is a great believer that reading for pleasure empowers children to find the voice inside themselves, and her workshops are aimed to develop writing skills, out-of-the-box thinking and an ability to understand the power of writing. Her books focus on stimulating imagination and creative thinking, and in this episode we explore why creative expression through writing is important in our schools. So Karen, welcome. Why is creative expression, do you think, important in our schools?
I think creativity is extremely important in schools, and actually in every walk of life, because it's part of who and what we are. I think, therefore I am. And it's necessary for our functioning, problem solving, how we adapt to life and so on. Stories, songs, poems, for example, particularly if we think of the periods of history and also culture, they show again who we are. And I think they also show our development, because it may show like what we were like as a nation, say, 100, 200, 300 years ago, and how we've progressed. And that covers things like our beliefs, our morals, cultural identity and self-identity, and how, again, that is all emerging, because, we can look at it and think, well, which way do we actually want to go from here?
We talked about sort of writing, and that's our form of creative expression. If those things are written down, what fascinates me is they're written down forever.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So they're kind of like a go-to point,
Yeah.
aren't they? In a way, they give us the ability to look onto something and to examine it if the written word wasn't there. And even going back to Neolithic, Mesolithic times with cave paintings,
Yeah.
again, the pictures are telling us things about ourselves, about life, and also again, problem solving.
Creative expression is actually so rooted in who we are and tells a really deep and meaningful story, doesn't it?
It does, and I think it's very good for us mentally as well. I think it makes writing, you write something, you've created something, and it makes you feel good. It enthuses us. It's that kind of like aha moment, isn't it? Really,
Yes, and you get this gut feeling, don't you, when you've got it right. You can write and
absolutely.
rewrite and rewrite.
Yes.
And you know when it feels, yeah, that's what I wanted to say. That's how I meant it to come across.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
So, what do you feel creative writing in particular brings to the primary curriculum or brings to schools in general?
I think it brings an incredible lot of value. I mean, writing is cross curriculum.
Mm.
It encompasses it, it falls into every subject, and I think creative writing, it gives us a chance, as I've said, to explore the world, situations, and for us to consider what we would do in a situation, and also consider other people's points of view, because perhaps we haven't looked at it like that before. And I think it also, creative writing is important in schools, um, because I think it empowers children. It gives you, because if you write something, you've got ownership of it. What happens is because it's what you want to happen. And again, I think it then encourages very divergent thinking, because you think, oh, let's try this. Oh, let's try that. Oh, let's try the other. And before you know it, you've got a whole springboard of different ideas. And I think that gives children a real buzz.
I think you're right. It opens up possibilities, doesn't it? It was stimulating the imagination, was one of the things you said there, that it's things that haven't happened yet, or perhaps in the real world couldn't happen, but it opens up this whole new world for children of their own imaginations and what might be possible.
It is. And even within fantasy books, the situations, the problems that the characters come across are all really the same kind of ones that
Mm.
we have in our world, in everyday life. You've always got the fight between good and evil, and the choice, which path are you going to take, because you can't walk two paths. The bullies, how do you handle that? Friendship, are your friends really your friends? Are you making good friendship choices? And I think, again, books give you the power to explore that safely. But if I do this, this will happen.
Mm.
You,
Yeah,
you,
that's really valuable. I'm thinking of reading. When you're reading, you can think, well, which character would I follow? But equally, writing it for yourself gives you that greater freedom of expression, doesn't it?
I've got friends, who have studied psychology, or they're counsellors or whatever. One of the things they always say, whether they're working with children or adults, is write it down.
Mm.
Write your emotions down. Write your perception of it down. Don't send it to the person. That's the worst thing you could do. That will not help. But then go back and then analyze it. And sometimes too, just getting it off your chest is is helpful. Just like talking to somebody else, a good trusted friend is um, is helpful. But also having it there in black and white allows you to, I think, to look at it and think, yeah, I've got every right to feel that, or yeah, I'm not saying that I don't feel that, but perhaps this has happened because of A, B, and C, which
Mm.
I haven't considered. I think it allows us to give a more balanced view. Writing is very proactive, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so, of course, as we said, it promotes imagination and innovation, as well. And it also, I think, helps to give us a more balanced view.
Really interesting thinking of it as an evaluative purpose, then to get things off your chest and onto paper, and then you can analyze and evaluate those feelings more clearly.
It's very empowering, because any form of writing is proactive, rather than passive. I mean, I've had this discussion a lot with my boys when they were growing up. The eldest was never really into gaming.
Mhm.
The middle one, he was also on the autistic spectrum,
Mhm.
is, as a lot of autistic children are, and our youngest, liked it as well. And of course, when I go into schools, one of the first things they say is, "Oh, we love gaming. We love gaming." When you say, "What do you like to do in your spare time?"
Mhm.
But like I always say, and you say to mine, and also to the children in school, there are some really good, fun games out there that do help with your motor skills and they do help like with problem solving. But at the end of the day, it is still passive because all the options have already been laid out for you to choose from. You're
Mm.
not thinking of them yourself. I don't think personally, I'm sure there are lots of people out there who would disagree with me. I don't think that the gaming helps them with problem solving in the same way that writing something for yourself does.
I remember my nephews playing with Lego years ago when they
Yeah.
were tiny, and I was fascinated by the way they created stories with the characters purely from their own heads, their own
Yes.
imaginations. And they were really enjoying every element of it. Stories about the characters, about the vehicle that was going to take them from A to B and how we
Yes.
were going to get there. So, yes, they are now, as teenagers, much more interested in the gaming, though they do still explore Lego for sure. And I think you're right, it gives different things. Whilst there are problems to be solved in the games, and there are some really complex games
Yes.
that I struggle to follow, but but I think yes, things like Lego and using your hands and creating stories, either verbal or written, there is something really powerful in that. And you said the word empowering earlier.
It isn't. It's also all the language development.
Mm,
As well. In a lot of the games, there isn't the vocabulary. It's action. They're moving
yeah.
all the time. So they're not, I don't think, always getting that vocabulary, which is necessary for interactions with each other.
Mm,
I mean, so often people put something across in a way they don't actually mean to
mm.
because perhaps they haven't got that absolutely wide vocabulary to choose from that, or perhaps, well, it would be better if I use this word rather than rather than that word.
That's so true. And I can always identify readers in the classroom. I remember shocking a child once and I said, "Well, you're a reader, aren't you?" And he looked at me and said, "How do you know?" I said, "Your choice of vocabulary, the way you phrase things, it's learnt from the reading." So although we started talking about creative writing and expression, and I was thinking of it from the child's perspective, actually consuming that helps us to be better speakers, listeners, writers ourselves, doesn't it?
It does, and reading and writing go together, I
Mm,
think. You can't separate them. It's like breathing. You breathe in, unless you want to like collapse, you've got to breathe out again. And reading and writing is like that. You read in words, you breathe in words and you breathe them back out again. They're, they're two sides of the same coin.
mm,
Yes, I mean, in workshops, yes, I deliver writing workshops, but they are also reading workshops because the children are having to read what to do. It might be body language, that is a very valid form of reading. It might be the written word, but reading is all around us. I mean, one of the activities that I suggested a while ago and was in the reading tip section on my website, and also posted on Instagram and on LinkedIn, was how the world around us is a story. There are reading and writing opportunities. I'm talking about writing to like at a verbal level. If you're telling somebody a story that's coming from your imagination, you are writing it
mm.
uh, in a sense, just from everything around you. Our world is full of wonders. It's like you pass a post box on the street. Thousands and thousands of people have posted letters in there. Who are they? Who do you think they are? Can you like, imagine somebody who did that?
Yeah.
Or you pass um, a statue. What might that statue say? If it could make a comment on all the things that it's seen because of all the things that have happened underneath it, or,
Mm.
or passing by.
Over a long period of time as well.
Yes,
That statue
absolutely.
perhaps stood there for hundreds of years,
Yes.
seen a lot of change. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
really fascinating viewpoint. One of the things I was going to say earlier as well, that when I was an Ofsted inspector going into schools, I witnessed some early years children, very young children, playing in the forest school area.
Hmm.
And what I saw there was an incredible use of language for practical purposes. They had to use the right language in order to retrieve the correct tools, to share, to collaborate. And all of those things are prerequisites for good reading and writing.
Absolutely.
I think sometimes we forget that, or maybe policymakers aren't so clear about it. I think practitioners
Yeah.
understand, but it could be the policymakers are feeling we need to be sitting down with a pen and paper in hand and
Yes.
writing stories. But actually, if we give those children those rich experiences in the outdoors or inside play,
Yes.
all of those crucial foundations enable our children to have those that rich vocabulary, those fantastic experiences on which to draw upon later when it comes to telling stories and writing.
That's right, because it's providing them with the skills
Mm.
that they need. I mean, I think, and I know, I've been into so many schools, and I taught for, a long time as well. And I think teachers get very frustrated with the fact that they know the best way to deliver something, but policy does not allow them to do that. And then who gets blamed? The teacher.
Mm. One of the purposes of this podcast really is to try and embrace that challenge and say, do you know what? We know what we're doing. Let's interpret the guidance, but let's allow some of that interpretation to be creative opportunities for our children
Absolutely.
because we know that's what works. And how can they imagine that letterbox full of letters if they've never posted a letter to somebody? Real life experiences are what provides those opportunities for imagination and for creative writing and generally creative expression.
That's right. That's absolutely spot on. Because if we said, what it does is in short, it spills over into the real world, and it
Mm.
helps us to make sense of everything, and it gives us a purpose. Like, why are we doing this? As well. And by giving them those early experiences, and then like that introduction into writing, we're helping children to develop critical thinking skills as well, in terms of analyzing and identify, and up leveling their own work in terms of the academic targets of spelling, punctuation, grammar,
Yeah.
but also helping them to develop plots.
Like you say, that critical thinking, I'm particularly thinking of vocabulary choices.
Yes.
We talked a bit about it earlier. So, which word would you choose here? Well, is that the most powerful word, or could you perhaps use a different word? What order do you want to put those words in? Does it matter what order you put them in? It's all of those skills, isn't it, that are perhaps not always seen by everybody. The value isn't appreciated that, yes, the creative writing provides all these opportunities for creative thinking as well.
It does. And one of the things that writers always do, as you know, is we read back our work out loud. Does it sound right? And again, I think that's a very valuable skill, taught in schools, because it's when you see it is one thing, reading it in your head, reading it out loud and how you would read it, paying attention to the punctuation, I mean, the commas, semicolons, exclamation marks. They're there for a reason. They're
Mm.
there to bring the writing to life. They're there to put the point across. So children, again, by reading their work out loud, can analyze and think, well, do I need to have a comma there? Yes or no? Um, am I using the right voice for that character? And again, about the word order. Well, actually, thinking about it, I think I'm going to swap the order around of those two adjectives.
Yeah.
And that, it helps them to create flow in their writing. But again, I think often schools are under such pressure to get things done that this has to be done in this very short period of time, 45 minutes, because tomorrow we're moving on to the next thing, because that's what government
Mm.
policy says. Where actually, if they were allowed to stay with that piece of writing for, for a few days, like in the good old days, like when I started teaching, you could do that. I think the children benefited so much more because they could really develop their work and really develop themselves as writers too. With my students, for example, that's one of the things we always do if we're doing creative writing, whether it's at Key Stage 2 level, Key Stage 3 or Key Stage 4. I get them to read it back out loud. Say, would you want to listen to somebody saying it in that voice?
Mm.
Would you want somebody to use those words? To you, because quite often I find too that children tend to think that the thesaurus is a direct translation, that synonyms mean what they say. They are similar, but
Yeah.
not identical. So again, I think by writing and then analysing, reading it out loud, and actually looking at the definition of those word choices, um, can be the difference of your friend inviting you home for tea, or saying, I'm never speaking to you again. Can't it, really?
Two things you said there. One of them was the grammar for writing I was thinking about. I know that Pi Corbett is a big fan of that and writes a lot about grammar for writing. And what we seem to have done is pulled the strands of grammar away and called it spag. Right, we're teaching
Yes.
spag now. Let's learn how to use a full stop, how to use a capital letter.
Yeah.
But actually, there's something really valuable about doing that in the context of your own writing. Why do we use capital letters? Why do we use a full stop? Do you think you need to end your sentence there? Or could you join it with a conjunction? What effect
Yes.
does that have on your writing? Is that what you intended? Or could a shorter, punchier sentence have more impact?
Absolutely. And like the power, often we teach in schools, don't repeat yourself. But actually, the device repetition has a powerful and necessary place in creative writing for creating tension, for really putting across what it is that you're trying to say, and really bringing that point home as well. One word sentences, again, are very powerful for that. Like I looked at, just doing this off the top of my head, I looked at Jake standing there, full stop, wet, full stop, angry, full stop, bursting with fury. Okay, that's a verb phrase, but you see what I mean.
Yes.
Having those as those short one word to short phrase sentences brings it much more home to the reader of how Jake is looking and how he's feeling, what he is experiencing.
As long as children aren't overusing those techniques and they
Absolutely, yes.
realize their place, then it has huge value. And we're not teaching children, oh, you mustn't use this. And then they see it in a book they're reading and they think, hang on a minute, I was told not to use that. Why is it now being used? If we explain that there is value in it in
Yeah.
small doses.
Same, children often say, oh, but you're not supposed to start a sentence with and. But often set right, you're not supposed to start a sentence with but or because. But if it's for dramatic effect, for example, and also, of course, if you're writing in the first person, a children's book, and often I think like in adult ones too, it's that informal speech that you want. The way that people speak makes that connection with the reader.
Yes, I'm also thinking when we teach children about using speech, we need a bit more speech, children, and then
Yes.
you teach that, and then every line is speech. So
Yeah.
it's a very similar thing, isn't it, to what we're talking about? As long as each skill is used appropriately. And that's the key here. If we're teaching it out of context, how can
Yes,
children see how appropriate it is? I'm not against teaching it separately as a skill if we then apply it in context.
that's it. I mean, again, when I was teaching, um, and we will be talking about sentence structure, where, where does the full stop go? How do you know? And so on. And then, of course, you would have a textbook and it would be put in the capital letter and full stop. And we have like number one, two, three, and four, and they're not connected to each other. So the children just say, oh, put it there, and I put that there.
Yeah.
But I think if they're then told, right, go off, and I want you to do a piece of creative writing on, like, say, like the Romans, if that's what we're doing in history,
Mhm.
or whatever, and I want you to think, like, where do you think now the capital letters and the full stops will go? And I think then having to do it within their own work is much more effective and much more of a learning
Mm.
experience for them, because then they can physically see why it has to go there. And again, as like with direct speech, they can see again then why it's making the writing clumsy if
Mm.
it's being overused.
Can you tell me how creative writing has had an impact on your own life?
I think it's made me a lot more confident. As a child in school, I was very quiet. Often throughout my school life, I found I was a quiet child in a class of very loud voices. So again, the writing gave me a chance to show my own voice and to show what I was thinking and how I felt. It's given me a sense of achievement, because it's what I have created. It's my baby, I suppose, in
Mm.
a sense. It's here because of me. And that's something I always try to say to children at workshop. Your writing is there because of you, not because of somebody who's devised a computer game, or somebody who's told you what to write. It's there because
Mm.
you created it. And I think, this is something that all authors feel, and it's what we want to encourage children to feel as well. It's about that finding the voice inside you. And I think that makes you feel that you have achieved something. It's also allowed me to share my passion for books and reading with children in schools,
Mhm.
through my workshops and at events, and so on. Because if I'm like attending a book fair, for example, or an author event, I like to chat with the children about the kind of books that they like,
Mhm.
and maybe, get them to read the blurb on the back of mine and ask them, where do you think this story might go? And again, you find then they start coming out with all these ideas. They're expressing their own voice. And I'd say to them, look, you're a writer. And I think, as we said at the very beginning, it's been an outlet for releasing emotions. Writing about things helps me to safely offload. Again, like many creative people, I do tend to overthink things. I think, sometimes I will take something personally that wasn't actually intended,
Mhm.
um, that way at all. But by sort of like writing it down and then looking at it, I can think, no, no, you weren't being rude, or right, that's you off my Christmas card list, you know. But it's a safe way of offloading.
And I
Again,
think that's important for children, isn't it? For those children who are not as loud or as openly confident as others, we need to provide these creative opportunities for them to have their voice and to support their mental well-being as well.
absolutely, because it allows children then, when they've written something down, to reflect on it, and to maybe consider their perspective,
Mm.
on it. And also, I think maybe if they then read it back and think, well, this is actually maybe something that I would like to talk to an adult about, it allows them to do that. And I think also maybe it allows a teacher reading it, or an adult reading it, thinks, um maybe I need to, have a chat with that child
Mm,
because
mm,
there are obviously things that are worrying them. But also, I think sometimes, as a teacher, when I was teaching in schools, I would read something that a child had written, and I would think, wow, that's really amazing. And then I would, then encourage them to enter writing competitions,
mm.
and say, you writing that has inspired me so much that I think you need to share it with people. I think that you should enter these competitions because you've really got something to say. And it's not about winning them, it's
Mm.
about the fact that you are out there taking part, and you'll have such great fun, in doing that. So again, I think, like, for me, writing makes me feel whole. It makes me feel complete. Without it, I wouldn't be complete. And I think that's something, again, that can be useful for children too. I think their writing can help them to make them feel complete. Apart from one or two sports, I wasn't a particularly sporty child at school, and certainly the secondary school that two of my boys went to. I noticed quite quickly that the way that the school judged them was how good they were on the cricket field, how good they were on the rugby field. But children who are writing stories, they're maneuvering obstacles all the time. Their mental agility is just the same as the one that's whacking the with the hockey stick. I think that creative writing should perhaps be renamed mind sport or something like that.
I love that mind sport. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Dodge the villain. What are you going to do to dodge that villain? So and so needs help. How are you going to do it? What have you got to go around to find them? What do you need? How fast do you need to go?
Well, I guess it's linguistic agility, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Finding the right words to express really what you mean. And
Yeah,
it's interesting because a lot of guests actually in series two of this podcast, so where we're looking at creative expression, have revealed things about themselves that perhaps they weren't that confident in school. And if it wasn't for the creative subjects, they'd have been overlooked.
yes.
And to me, that's really sad. But it also fires me up to want to ensure that we don't lose those opportunities for the children now.
Yeah,
If we were feeling like that decades ago for some of us, and we're now thinking of these children where we're imparting knowledge and testing and measuring. For some children in some schools, the creative subjects are being squashed. What is that doing to children's mental well-being? We keep talking about the fact that there's a mental health crisis
yeah.
and that there are more and more children in distress, but yet we're squashing those creative subjects. When is somebody going to make that connection between the two?
Absolutely. I think teachers do.
Yes.
I mean, when I go into schools, and again, when I was teaching, teachers are very passionate about the power of writing, the power of reading, the power of music, the power of art, the power of drama.
Mm.
But yet, those are always the first thing to go.
I
On
think we need brave leadership. That's
Yeah,
one thing that's so crucial. We need leaders who stand by their beliefs and their
yes,
understanding. And I would urge listeners to go right back to series one, episode one, and listen again to Tina Farr and Claire Wiles, who talk about the joy of learning and do exactly that, make connections,
yes,
ensure that there are creative opportunities and their children thrive. They don't have issues with absence because their children want to be there. They want to join in. They want to participate. And I know Hal Roberts talks about botheredness and how we really care about what it is we're
yes.
teaching. And if we're passionate and we know these things work, then we should be brave and make sure that we creatively work out how we can make sure that they happen.
I mean, I'm linked with Tina Farr on LinkedIn, so I read a lot of the things that she puts, and it's really clear that they have this cross curriculum approach.
Mm.
It's not done in isolation. So the children carry the skills from one subject into another because they see where they're relevant. And I also really admire Tina because she's not frightened to say about the power of play
Mm.
at all. And that is the starting point for creative writing is play.
Mm.
Because when children are playing, they are creating stories and they're also reenacting real life situations. You've got your factual writing there. I mean, I think it's such a shame that play has gradually been taken more and more out of the curriculum.
There are lots of people fighting back on that. I know
Yes,
Jeanette Basson is one
yes,
of them. Hal Roberts, a real advocate of play as well.
yes,
There are lots of people who truly believe in it. And I think if we can hang on to that, we'll prepare our children for this uncertain future and encourage
absolutely.
them to solve problems. You said that play is really important for creative writing. I don't dispute that, but I also think it's important for science, for maths, for geography, for
Absolutely.
absolutely every subject in the primary curriculum.
It is. I mean, I remember this was many, many years ago on a teaching practice. It's before I qualified, and it had been raining, and so the children, the early years, so they were out on the playground, afterwards, but the puddles were there, and the group of children, young children, talking about, well, they were actually jungle explorers, and this was a big a big lake because they've been doing about the about rivers and lakes in class, and they were problem solving and using maths about would they get across how would they get across the river, how would they get across the lake, which is actually just a puddle. Yeah, they could just have walked over it, but they weren't doing that because in their minds
Yeah,
they were envisioning it, so they were using maths that it was like, you know 100 times that size.
yeah.
And it was just wonderful to see them working together because, again, so much of learning in the classroom relies on working together.
Mm,
In maths, in science, um, in English, in RE, PSHE, it's all about working together.
mm,
And, in play in the primary school is about that. So they're learning those skills, which then transfer into all the subjects.
absolutely. I don't think we disagree there at all.
So,
Um, what's your most memorable lesson from your own school days or one you've enjoyed teaching? And why do you think they've stuck in your mind?
from my school days, I had the most amazing English teacher in secondary school, Mr. Casson, he was called. He was a wonderful teacher. you you did not cross him. Even the really naughty boys and girls nobody crossed Mr. Cass. you know, in English literature, if we did a book, say like Lord of the Flies or Animal Farm, um, he would not just deliver it as a story. He would deliver the whole of the history, the historical context of the Russian Revolution, who the characters represented in Animal Farm, in Lord of the Flies, how society breaks down very easily when we don't have rules, and how characters like Simon, who is killed, represent not just aspects of society, but also religious figures as well. Moses, when he comes down the mountain and finds everybody having an orgy and is not happy about it, and you know, in Christianity, I mean, I'm a practicing Christian, Jesus being hung on the cross because other people didn't like what he was having to say, just like the same way that Jack in Lord of the Flies doesn't want Simon to tell everybody that that's not a monster, that's just a dead pilot up there. And he just brought it to life. So the book made sense to you
Mm,
because you were reading it um, in context. He was very much about the emotions in the book, And then because he also taught us for creative writing, he would give us story prompts for things that he wanted us to include in the story. So again, that we could see how everybody's mind is different, because everybody is different, which is great. It'd be very boring if we were all the same. We
Yes.
need variety. We need diversity. We need to hear the voices of everybody. And one particular day, he asked us to write a short story that included a parrot and an extremely eccentric grandma, and also a authority figure in terms of like the council or the government. And I ended up writing a story about a supposedly frail old granny who led a double life as a biker and as an undercover secret agent. And she had this parrot that always like sat on her shoulder, and the parrot just couldn't shut up. And so it was like her sidekick, but it always ended up like grassing her up and getting her in trouble because it couldn't keep its mouth shut. And Mr. Casson actually read it out to the class, and much to my surprise, because like I said, I wasn't the cool kid. I was the one that was there with the book in front of me, like that. The class laughed all the way through and applauded at the end. Um, and that gave me such a feeling of power. And I think that creative writing again does that
Mm.
for for children, because they see other people are enjoying what they're reading as well. So I've always been very grateful to Mr. Casson. Actually, in my book, The Tombstone Detective Agency, um, Alex, who's one of the two main protagonists, at one point in the book, he's having a conversation with the teacher, and I actually made that teacher Mr. Casson because
Oh,
I wanted to sort of um, acknowledge
yeah.
what he had done for me.
Oh, that's really lovely.
It
Really
is,
lovely.
and like teaching wise, I always loved doing a lesson where I would get the children to choose a story or a nursery rhyme or poem that was a bit kind of like saccharine sweet, really. And then we would like discuss ways before they went off to do their creative writing about how they could make it like a bit more punchy, a bit more kick-ass. Does the hero or heroine really need to be that? Let's face it, they probably couldn't fight the way out of a paper bag, because I think that shows them that everything, life is not set in stone. So if
Mm,
you can change it in a story, you can try and change it in your own life. You might not always succeed, but you've had a go. Again, in my new book, What If? One of the questions at the end of the book is about, what if you could do one thing to change the world? What would it be? And why? Because just one thing, just like holding a door open for somebody, can
mm.
change that person's day.
In series one, again, I talked to Gavin McCormack, who's based in Australia, and he encourages children to write a book to change the world. The children choose a value, something that they believe in, they choose a charity, and when their books are produced as real hardback books and they go on sale, and the money raised goes to the child's chosen charity. So they really are changing the world, not just with their written story, but also the actions
Yeah,
by
yeah.
donating to charity through sales of their book.
Yes, there was I was delivered at the end of last academic year. I delivered a workshop at a school called Tadpole Church of England Primary in Swindon. And one of the little girls came to me afterwards, and she had this book, and she said, "Can I show you this?" She said, "I've written this book." And it's again, it was the same kind of thing. It had been, she'd written it. Her aunt was involved with the charity, and again, the proceeds went, but
Oh,
so I bought a copy,
yeah.
of it. So just a fellow author,
Oh,
but she was what I really liked. It was the fact she was so happy that she had been allowed to do something to
mm,
help somebody else, because it's an honor, it's a privilege if somebody allows us to do something for them that helps.
Tell me a bit more about the What If books.
Well, with What If, I think again, I wrote it as a kind of springboard into creative writing, but also I wanted it to be more than that. I wanted it to be a springboard into helping us to develop problem solving skills, again, in developing empathetic thought, morals and ethics. Um, so I wanted it to be a discussion point, a discussion book, which is why it's written as a series of open questions. The questions are in two parts, so it might be something like, if it's like a funny question, such as, what if fish had feet? What kind of shoes would they wear? And but again, with something like that on the surface, it's just a funny question for maybe writing, a creative story about. I delivered before it was published, because I wanted to trial it. I delivered an assembly at St Gregory's Roman Catholic Primary School in Margate. I used to teach there many, many years ago. And they're very, as Tina Farr, they're very into the whole child um, approach. It seeps through into everything. And one of the little boys, because it was a whole school assembly, one of the year one boys, I think it was, put his hand up and said, "Oh well, if it was an octopus, then I'd wear running shoes if I was an octopus because I need to run away from the shark." And
Oh,
a year six boy put his hand up, a very deep thinking boy, I think, um, and said, "Yeah, in the ocean, um, sharks have to chase other fish and eat them." Because otherwise they'd starve to death. But we have sharks in real life too, don't we? And I said, "Oh, what do you mean by that?" And he said, "People who take advantage of other people. It's like if you're a bully." He said, "You're being a shark." And it led in class apparently to this whole discussion. Again, it's about how any question can be taken in 1,000 different directions. So I said the book contains, wants to promote creative writing, such as that, or if you want to take it the other way, morality. And then gradually it moves into more serious type questions. But in one of them, what if if the only colour in the world was grey? And again, when prior again to publication, I trialed the whole book in three local primary schools here in Medway. And again, the children came up with some really thoughtful and insightful ideas. Um, and also with questions such as, what if you saw someone being unkind to somebody else? Would you do something about it? Or would you walk away? And again, it led to the discussion of it. We like to think we'd be the person, the knight in shining armor, jumping in there. But actually, as one child said, I would hope I would do the right thing and go and help them or go and tell a teacher. But I'd also perhaps be a bit frightened about what that person might do to us because the teacher can't be there with us all the time. And again, it led to this big discussion about being, that actually to do the right thing isn't always easy. And it's, so it shows what we are as a person. Can we reach down inside ourselves and find that strength? And I was so impressed with the answers from the three Medway schools, because also I wanted to trial, could they then, from using the book, be able to create their own what if questions or their own what if books. And they came up with such marvelous ones that I actually included a section from each school with the name of the school, and saying, these are some fantastic what if questions contributed by, and the name of the school and some of their questions for teachers and children to be able to use then as a springboard, for their own writing. So a big shout out to Hilltop Primary, St William Roman Catholic Primary, and to St Nicholas Church of England School here in Medway, because they were a real big help. They showed me that the book does work.
oh, that's wonderful. And I do hope that they're all listening to this podcast and cheering when they hear their names called out. So thank you for that. That's lovely. It made me think of philosophy for children,
Yeah,
really.
yeah,
That's your books are a tool for facilitating that, aren't they? facilitating that deep discussion where we don't always have the answer and just opening our minds to possibilities.
It is. I mean, in my children's novel for Key Stage, I have two children's novels. Um, the Tombstone Detective Agency and Please the Gremlin at My Homework. And again, really, we are covering moral issues. It's about differences, about friendships, and so on, and also about um, again how we perceive people. I mean, in Please Sir, the Gremlin at My Homework is a story about a boy called Cade who has to go is sent off to go and stay with great uncle Fitz, who is a zoologist, but actually he runs a rest home for monsters, which they're not scary, they're like that really annoying, you know, little toddler that's, you know, brother or sister that you might have, you know, always getting you into scrapes, into trouble. And in the story, the gremlin eats Cade's homework, which gets him in trouble. But also, having had a bad day at school because the gremlin has eaten his homework, all Cade wants to do when he comes home is lie on his bed and chill out. But no, the gremlin comes in, steals his phone, causes chaos, flushes it down the loo, and the children have to write as a defense lawyer for the gremlin about should he be in, you know, yes, he's done this, we know he's done this, but should we feel sorry for him? So in short, they've got to create a backstory about
Yeah.
why he is like that. And again, we do like a whole mind map of well, perhaps it's Uncle Fitz's fault. You know, he's enabled the gremlin to behave like that by never telling the gremlin off. Perhaps the gremlin's been badly treated in the past. Perhaps the gremlin is jealous of Cade because he's come to live with Uncle Fitz and there's not as much attention. So you've got that, if like almost like a new baby arrival,
Yeah.
you know, kind of thing. I mean, one child said perhaps a gremlin um, wanted Cade's attention and thought that he spent far too much time on the phone, and so that was why he flushed it down below. He was doing it to help Cade. Again, it's about all my books. I try to make them meaningful. You know,
Mm.
all different um, things that can be topics,
Yeah.
even though they're fantasy books that can that can be discussed. I mean, in the Tombstone Detective Agency, which is about a group of ghost detectives, but the Tessie, an Edwardian ghost girl, who's like the main protagonist,
Mm.
makes friends with a mortal boy called Alex, who's also the main protagonist. And there are all sorts of complications because they are friends with each other. Because um, it's really, the ghosts don't like for different reasons don't like mortals,
Mhm.
and of course mortals are scared of ghosts. So really what I was trying to do was write a book about differences,
Yeah.
but without going down the and there are some wonderful books about about children coming from other countries and joining schools here, and the trials, and about them learning to understand the culture they've now come to, and the children in that culture learning to understand those.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to kind of take it from a different angle,
Mm.
and so which is why I had the ghosts
That's brilliant.
and have the mortar. So it's a funny book, but it is also again about that at the end of the day, differences are great because
Yeah.
we'd be very boring, as I've said, if we were all the same. But also within that, there are lots of things that are the same about us. Ghosts are still leading the kind of lives. They've got jobs and so on, the ghost schools that they led when they were alive. So also perhaps we focus too much on differences. Oh,
Mm.
and not looking actually what is the same. At the end of the day, we're all people.
What's next for you, Karen Greaves?
The National Literacy Trust, as you know, have designated the 25-26 academic year as the National Year of Reading. I'm so thrilled about that. I'm hoping to be being booked for workshops where I can help children to inspire them to want to read because it's such a wonderful, fantastic thing. Um, the amazing things there are to find out if if you read. I would love to take part in more podcasts, like yours, with these wonderful discussions about the power of
Mm.
writing and um, the power of reading, and because I think it makes children healthier.
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
And in terms of writing itself, I've just started a new middle grade novel. I'm
Hmm.
really excited to move on with it and, see what happens in the story because I am a what if person, myself really. So I've got no idea of how the how the characters are going to evolve, how the plots are going is going to evolve. Um, because again, like many writers, I have like the general idea, and I'll maybe jot down a few points. But there's again, as I say to the children in school, it's not set in stone. You can change that. Um, I always say to them, with my books, often the ending I've envisioned is totally different to what it actually becomes because the characters have evolved. A number of schools have already booked for me to deliver what if workshops. I'm really, excited to see how they're going to react react to it. And also I'm excited to show them the pictures. I have two amazing illustrators, Zoe Saunders, who um, did the covers for who is an Italian artist and has done all the illustrations and the covers for What If and also for my other early years Key Stage 1 picture book. Pictures, again, are stories, help, to facilitate, creative writing too, and that out of the box thinking. So, I'm excited about that too.
Yeah, that sounds
I'm just
brilliant.
really looking forward to this National Year of Reading.
Perhaps you could send me some links to your workshops and your books, and we'll include those in the podcast notes so that anybody listening to the podcast wanting to find out more can do so quite quickly and easily. And who else passionate about the arts, the expressive arts, creative arts, would you like to hear on Creative Minds Shaping the Future and why?
I'd like to hear Dr. Jacqueline Harding. As you know, she's a child development expert and author of The Brain That Loves to Play. Jacqueline really gets that books are part of play because they're a springboard into games, into role play, into drama. That helps us to examine, analyze, as I said, and make sense of the world around us. It helps equip us for life. And, the earlier, I think, as Jacqueline does, that children experience and practice doing this, um, the better. I know Jacqueline is just in process of completing um, a new book, and I'm fortunate enough that to be mentioned in that as I've contributed to case studies for her um, about how books can facilitate then games which cause children to really enjoy themselves and laugh. So again, it's that bonding experience and that inclusion, and then they're all bouncing their ideas and everything off each other. It's all about the power of laughter. And of course, as you'll know, if you Google Jacqueline, um, she works a lot in television as well,
Mhm.
as an advisor.
Well, thank you so much for spending the time with me chatting today about creative writing, reading, creative expression in general. We've talked about the passion of the teacher, their subject knowledge, how important that is. We've talked about play and how essential it really is for problem solving. We've talked about your books, the What If books, and the fact that they can be a vehicle for philosophy for children, giving children their inner voice chance to shine. So thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversations. We've covered
Thank
so
you.
much in just about an hour's chat.
Thank you very much for having me.
I hope Karen has provoked you to think about how powerful creative writing is for our young people and why we should find time for it in our schools today. In the next episode, I speak with a panel from Beeford Arts, an arts organisation based in North Devon delivering a 3-year project, A Voice to Tell Our Story. Here they are with a few words.
Opening up to a creative curriculum is the way to engage all children. This is one of the most inclusive, genuinely inclusive projects I think I've had the privilege to work on.
I'll never forget the first time when you say, okay, you can keep this story inside of you. You don't need to write it down. You've got the agency here. You can tell it however you would like to. And the look on the children's faces when they realised that there weren't many rules here. There was the opportunity to play and express. That it was a different kind of challenge. It was work, but it was fun.
The children who have taken part, now at Key Stage 3 and beyond, are, winning awards in photography, are, writing, reading and doing brilliantly.
If you're following this podcast from the start, I hope you've enjoyed listening to Series 1. If you're a new listener, welcome and thank you for joining us. In Series 1, we asked, does creativity have a place in education? In Series 2, we explore creative expression and why it is important for us all. In this series, I speak to painters, sculptors, musicians and dancers, to name a few creative disciplines. I already have more fantastic guests lined up for Series 3 and 4, where I'll be talking with inspiring individuals with a range of experience. If this sounds like you, maybe you have a view on creative thinking or creative expression, please get in touch by following me at ACPC4A, the number 4, on X, or Emma Palestanga on LinkedIn to connect. There are many ways you can support the show for free, and it's much appreciated. Share with your contacts, rate the show, or leave a review. If you like, you can buy me a virtual coffee to help with the costs of the podcast platform. Please follow this podcast so that you can stay up to date on the release of each episode. Thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next episode of Creative Minds Shaping the Future.